Okay. Well. Yeah, we wanted to do this and we'll talk about how we met, and then we'll talk about what it's been like for Tammy to be married to me. We met almost 8 years ago in the last remaining Ebro lesbian bar in Philadelphia, which is no longer there. And
Sisters.
Yep, sisters. And Tammy was you were on tour.
Mm-hmm. With Sesame Street Live.
I wasn't going to disclose
I'm going to just say it. I was Elmo and Prairie Dawn on Sesame Street Live because I teach dance now at the college at Brockport. So I'm a professor, but before I got my MFA, I needed to get out of New York City, and I got this job touring with Sesame Street Live, and I got first hired as Elmo. I mean, it's all complicated. I'm not going to get into that. Unless you're really interested in Sesame Street Live, happy to divulge about that. But regardless, I was performing not a show you might want to brag about in a gay bar upon meeting someone you thought was attractive, but I did.
You did.
And
anyway, so the short version is that for the next year, I would fly out to random cities all over the country and meet her, and then she moved to Philly, and I moved to Ohio.
And we lived together in Philly, and we lived together in Ohio, where I got my master's. And then Britt left to get their second degree in nursing, and then now we live in Rochester, New York.
And now we're married.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. So that was that. So this whole like transitioning process with Tammy has been years. It was never like, I think most people say, I kind of knew, so it was like that big like sit down talk with your partner about like coming out, and that wasn't the case for me. I very much like it was a stepwise process for me. So I kind of like, I was in nursing school, and I just remember being like so uncomfortable with my chest, and I was thinking about it constantly, and like the worst time in the world to be thinking about that. And we were living apart at the time, and I contacted her and was like, I had done a lot of research about binding and
you were a
about
camp
binding.
Counselor at the Camp Aranudik.
That was later. That was after that was after I graduated. That was after I graduated.
I thought that the binding thing came up because you were around people who were non-binary, and it was something you had never really imagined before.
No, that was after.
Oh.
That was that was after.
My timeline is off.
Because it was my first nursing job.
Right.
I had to take a week of vacation for that. So I'll never forget that.
So you brought binding up to me before Camp Aranudik?
Yes, I was in nursing school. I was in one of my final
and your
semesters.
Chest was big, I remember.
It was getting bigger, and I think that was making everything worse.
Very uncomfortable. They were very uncomfortable with that.
So I started binding, but maybe you could talk about how that went for you.
So what I remember is different from what Britt's saying, but I remember being at Governor's School teaching there when you called me for the first time. Oh, that was the first summer of nursing school. Okay. Yeah. So we've done a fair amount of long distance in our relationship, and so I was teaching at a summer dance program for young people in North Carolina, and I happened to have a really good friend down there who identifies as non-binary and binds, and I was using they, them, their pronouns with them, and it was new information for me, but it wasn't a big deal because I met this person like in the middle of their transition or already in transition. So it was actually really helpful for me to have that person there for me when Britt called me and was like, so there's this contraption that I can buy that can like squash my chest down, and the word binding I feel like reminds me of like foot binding, like oppressive.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
action.
Also the context is that we weren't living together, and so our communication had been choppy and
through the telephone, but I also feel like the space away from me maybe gave you a chance to really maybe research and think about things without me like...
No, I was in nursing school. I couldn't think about anything but that. So
That's
it was
true.
like me being in nursing school and then like I like could not think about anything other than like nursing school and like my chest. It was like, and then so I think from there it kind of like once I graduated, like I was binding. Like from then on, like kind of on and off. Oh yeah, keep going about that.
So when Britt first called me to talk to me about this, though, I remember I was in the car and I was like in the AC because it was really hot down in North Carolina, and they were like, "I'm thinking about getting a binder," and I remember the first thing that I thought was like, "Oh my God, are you becoming a man? Like, do you want to become a man?" I feel like that was my first impulse. That was
the first thing you said.
Which, of course, goes from like 0 to 100, which is not at all what a transition is like. But I think immediately my brain went there, which was really disorienting to me. And then I remember my friend, my non-binary friend at the time, who's still my friend, down in North Carolina was like, "Well, does that mean you would like love them any less?" And I was like, "Of course not." And that there was something about the way that they framed it to me that was like, I'm being insensitive, and like, of course not. I love this person. Like we're in it to win it, you know? Why would this change anything about how I feel about that person? But it definitely changed the way I perceived them. Like I don't know. Like
perceived me?
Yeah. Because my view of you then changed. It's like when your kid comes out. Or you have an idea about who a person is, and then you realize like I am not you. I don't have control over who you are, and I don't need to be able to maintain an image for me to feel secure with our relationship and with you and with me.
Yeah.
But it certainly disrupted something that I imagined to be.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so then eventually I remember like doing the laundry for the first time and being like this is it. You know? And having a weird relationship with it at first.
Yeah.
And then it's like it's a piece of fabric, and I remember it did take some time for me to understand that it's just an article of clothing that happens to make you feel much better in your button-ups. And it didn't change at all the way I felt about you. In fact, it made me more attracted to you because you felt better in your body.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like how it made you over time. I realized how physically
because I ended up binding for about 3 years.
That's a long time.
It was a really long time, and it's very, as you know, everyone knows, it's extremely painful.
Yeah.
Over time, you slouch, your posture changes. It's not good for your breathing. It's just.
Yeah, I feel like metaphorically, it's like constricting all of these things in.
Right.
That you're not able to live fully in your body because you are physically restricted and then also like symbolically restricted.
Right. But it did help me for that time being to like get by a little bit, so I wasn't thinking so much about.
Yeah.
But then you start to think more about other things, like what shirt can I wear that's like, can I wear a V-neck that's like high enough up that doesn't show my binder?
Yeah.
Or a shirt that's like light enough so people can't see the lines.
Yeah.
So I would think about that a lot.
Did you wear a binder for our wedding?
I did. I had a white shirt and I wore a white binder.
So I remember when we got married, you had not come out as trans yet. No. You were not saying the word trans in relation to yourself in front of me, in front of anybody. Like that wasn't something that came up.
No. My first instinct was top surgery.
Yeah.
And I did a lot of research about that and I went through feelings of feeling guilty that if I still identified as female, still identifying as female, but also like having top surgery, there's not a lot of talk about that. And I did, and then I went to Camp Aeronautic, which
it's a youth
it's a youth group for trans kids, and I was one of the nurses there, and it was amazing. And I was just around so many people and like so many different expressions and so many different things, and I was like, oh my God, like it was almost just like, I can do this, like I'm allowed to do this. And
top surgery, you mean?
Yes, I was allowed to do top surgery, but also like explore my gender more because I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, like it's not, for me it wasn't like I was born in the wrong body. Like I know that is so clear to me, like it just wasn't that way for me. Mm-hmm. So it was like, I know that I cannot have these on my chest anymore. It was so restricting.
And so then we were living on Park Avenue, and we were like, okay, top surgery is a thing,
Top surgery is a
and
thing.
you talked to your family about it,
Yeah.
which one
The first time was not
did not
great.
go so well.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think I don't know if I had deeply processed it as I can't say. I feel like by the time you had top surgery, which was a year after
Yeah.
that time, the first time we were like, great, let's make the appointment.
Yeah.
I felt much more like I feel like I understood a little bit more what it meant to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wasn't there. I feel like at the time Britt had done so many like
Oh.
sorry everybody. Britt was like heavily as many of you are, yeah. Like in starting to find a community through Instagram and through YouTube about like understanding what it felt like for other people's experiences to be in a body that they wanted to change, and then like what was it like getting top surgery, what's the healing process like all that stuff, and
all the surgeons
and all the surgeons and all that. And it wasn't until you had done a lot of research and started to understand your own perspective, this is how I interpreted it, was when I was kind of, you invited me to like watch some of the videos.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing for the first time what those scars looked like on other people and being really shocked by that and being like, okay, so, and my first impulse was, I don't want someone I love to undergo a surgery that's going to leave them with scarring. Like that, regardless of the surgery, I think is a really intense process
Just
to
the
think
idea
about
of like someone you love having
surgery. And like, yeah, I think that I was like, it wasn't until I saw.
But my
those
perspective
images.
was, I could care less about the scars. I can treat the scars. I can do the scar tape. I can do whatever I need to do. That was the least of my.
But you
worries
also
was the
had all that
scars.
information because
I
you've
did,
been
because
researching
there was a period of time where I felt like I was so much in my head, and I was doing so much research that I couldn't even let you in yet.
Right.
So when I did start to let you in, and I did start to like have you watch these videos with me and like get more information.
I really recommend that for partners to become at a certain point, like to respect the fact that your partner needs to have a research experience on their own. Just like I needed to talk out with friends or whomever my own experiences before I shared those things with Britt, which I feel like we can talk about in a second. But there was a really important process for me in being included in the research and being included in like watching those videos of other couples talking about their experience and like what does it look like for someone to like get a testosterone shot. I had never seen that before. I don't do well with needles, like though. And then the more I was listening to other people with Britt, like, oh, I think when you would find a few people on YouTube, you're like, I really identify with this person's experience in their body. Then to hear someone else tell it helped you give a language. It helped me see how like happy that person was. And it helped me not only feel included, but kind of usher me along in my own experience of understanding your experience. Because a lot of the time how would I possibly know? And you were still trying to figure it out. So there was only so much you could tell me because you're like, I don't know.
I didn't have the language for it.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And so then it was a year after that first instance of like coming out to family and trying. Also, we hadn't saved a lot of money yet for the top surgery. It was a whole year after that when we made the next appointment, and then it was a year after that when you got surgery. Yes,
it was 8 months from when I made the appointment with Dr. Guermoni to when I actually had surgery. So we saved over those 8 months.
Yes,
yeah.
And that for me was really important time. I think, even though you were ready that first time, because I remember what happened is that Britt had then decided, I remember you saying this, maybe I don't need top surgery.
Yeah, I did say that.
Yeah, maybe.
That was after I came out to my family the first time because I was just terrified to do it without them, and
the surgery without them.
I was like, maybe I'll be okay. And,
Yes. This is Clark. He's been here along the way too.
Yep.
And so I remember you saying like, maybe I don't need it. Maybe it's an illusion. Maybe I can just be in these binders. And we were like, I remember, so like in sexy time, like we didn't really go in that geography of your body. Just in general, it wasn't an area that was particularly like an erotic zone for you, but and with shirt on and all that stuff. But there was a point, we had just bought this house, we had already been married, and Britt was extremely depressed, I would say. They stopped cleaning, which I'm not the most clean person, so
for some reason that's like the one thing that you always say is that like Britt stopped cleaning.
I was like this is bad. I was working overtime, I was doing a lot of laundry. And so you would stop cleaning, you were not eating all that much.
No, I had lost a lot of weight.
They were bummed. I don't remember what else really cued me in, but I remember just being like, just put them on the ground. That I could tell that you weren't yourself. And I remember we were in the living room, we had barely any furniture left yet in our house, and I remember being like, what's going on?
I remember we were sitting,
Yeah, and I was like, we need this. Oh, and you were very unhappy in your job. And, and at that time,
it's just the whole thing.
They were still using she, her pronouns, and those weren't all working well. And I remember we were like, we've got to do something, because this isn't, I can't be married to this Brit. Like this, not like I would be like, but I remember feeling like this isn't sustainable for either of us. And we talked for a long time, and top surgery was where the conversation was left. Like, we need to do this.
That was something that was like felt imminent to me.
So we made the appointment.
Yep.
Do you remember the first time you told me that you wanted to use they, them, their pronouns?
No, I think that it was like maybe I'll just have you and like some friends that are like real,
try it
out. Like chill and easily like can flow with whatever, like names and pronouns, like people who we're friends with who can just like change it as, easily. And we did that, and then I had you try he. I mean, I have people use he, him. I really don't mind he, him, honestly. I just, for some reason, for you, when you use he, it feels weirder to me than when other people use it. And I don't know why that is, but...
And I
guess I could dive into that if I really wanted to, but I don't want to care to.
Not right now. But, I feel like the pronoun thing has been an interesting experience for me. It's been a while now. I feel like my experience with my non-binary friend down in North Carolina was really useful, because I was using they, them, their pronouns with them. And it was really hard for me to use they, them, their pronouns with you at first. And I needed to be around people who I could practice with, really just practice using the correct pronouns, and to be able to mess up without it being really awkward. Because I feel like in some situations with some people, if I mess up, it sets a precedent that it's okay, or I'm setting a model and I like screwed up the model and there's a lot of pressure and it gets weird. But I remember when Leah and Chris were visiting, we were in the grocery store, and suddenly I was able to actually practice, because with people who I trusted, and with people who also needed to hear me say it. But if I messed it up, I just said the wrong pronoun, and then I corrected it, and I kept going. And it became like a habit of correction in a way that I could feel comfortable being like, shit, I screwed up. I just corrected it. But if I hadn't had because in some instances, maybe the partner works in a particularly conservative work environment, so then I got to be a master at avoiding pronouns. I avoided pronouns with my mom talking about you for
a long time.
Like a year, I feel like. I got to be a master at avoiding pronouns, saying your name, or I would start doing this thing. And maybe if you're in a place where you need to avoid pronouns, if you're talking about your partner, I would say, yeah, Britt would say something like, and I would quote you. So I would say, yeah, they're like, I can't be on this unit anymore. Instead of me having to then say your name 5,000 times in a sentence. Anyways, there's a strategy there. But
that's just like for safety. That's for like...
Yeah, or if you're not ready, ready to be outed yet.
Yeah, because we hadn't decided that we were going to talk to your mom yet.
Right.
And all of that stuff. So,
right.
Yeah.
not to say it's a healthy thing to avoid all the time, but I do think there are instances.
It's also exhausting.
Right. Yeah. Now I am freely able to use he, him, his pronouns. I say the word husband in public circumstances, where I imagine some trans men are really excited about using husband. I don't know how you feel about the word.
I don't mind it.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like I'm saying schlibber schlabber. Like it doesn't, it's like this random word that I'm using for you, but in circumstances like if the plumber is gonna come to our house, I feel like I'd rather establish Brit with male pronouns. Anyways, it took me years, I feel like, to arrive at a place where I, just like the binder, recognizing that when the first time I used the word husband on the phone with the plumber, actually, I remember like, okay, I'm just gonna say it because it's gonna make it easier. It's gonna be a safer environment, especially if Brit's home alone when this person comes to our home. And I said it and I hung up the phone. And it was like when the millennium, when everyone thought the banks were gonna like explode after everything happened in Y2K. And then the next day everyone was like, are the banks still okay? That's basically what it felt like for me. I was like, well, everything's the same. This person is the same. I'm the same. Nothing has changed. Our plumbing still sucks because the person hasn't come yet. And I realized it's just language. But I was just, for a while, I feel like I was living in this conundrum too about like, yes, they are just words. Like I can use words and they can have as little or as much meaning as we ascribe to those words. Mm-hmm. But those words are very, very important to you in a particular context. So I feel like it was an interesting place to be and continues to be an interesting place for me to think about like the importance of language when we're talking about our trans people and how to express the importance. Especially, I had to out you several times, like in my work environment, and when my colleagues fuck up pronouns, I have to set the precedent that it's not okay. It's not whatever, like no, I have to be the woman in the situation who's correcting my male colleagues, which is another problematic dynamic, but whatever. But getting used to that. But then also knowing that the fluidity of language in certain environments is just like, it's just a word and safety comes first.
I think in those circumstances, that if safety is an issue, and I've said this to my siblings, especially my sister, I had said, like, she asked me a lot of questions about pronouns, and I was like, you have to, just like I have to, and just like this is the territory. The territory is that if you feel in that moment like the person that you're talking to isn't safe, or like you just have to use your best judgment. Like if it's the plumber or like the handyman or something like that, like we're not gonna use they them pronouns. Like
most of the world doesn't use they them their pronouns.
So like to introduce something like that and to make it's just like it's not worth it. Like for someone to come into our home, know where we live, like I don't want, like that's just not worth it. So
and also we don't live in a particularly progressive town. I do feel like in some instances it feels like we could be the change we want to see in the world by insisting on they them their pronouns. Mm-hmm. But that's just not where we live.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I want to know what were we going to talk about? I want to know about your experiences with since I started testosterone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anything in particular about that? Just like watching change, or?
I guess. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that my first impulse was trying to like remember what it was like when you first started. Like, what did that feel like for me?
Yeah. And leading up to it, because there was a lot of, definitely anxiety on my part, but like, because it's just like this mysterious thing, and you're like, what's gonna happen to me? Like, you're not gonna turn into like a robot, but like, what changes are gonna happen? What am I gonna look like? Like, I don't know. What a weird thing. Like, I just kept thinking, like, what am I gonna look like?
And
but, I'm probably gonna look like me. Like, that's such a strange thing to think about. But the anxiety, or maybe like the anticipation of this like thing, this like point where you feel better? I don't know.
Well, I think similarly with my reaction to you wanting to wear a binder, which was, for those of you just joining, going from like 0 to 100. Like, oh my God, my partner is going to be a man, you know, like, which is great and fine at this point. But at that point, years ago, that felt like a huge leap.
Right. And I had not said anything to you leading up to that point.
Right.
So the binder thing was like kind of out of left field.
Right. And so, right. And so then I think initially with the testosterone, I had a similar reaction and I didn't know how long things take. I didn't understand like what the process of transitioning, the physical transition for you was going to be like. So I think one of my biggest fears was waking up one day and seeing, like, I missed it. Like, I look over and I see someone I don't recognize, which of course is irrational. At this point, we know that. But that was a fear of mine.
Yeah.
And I remember when you initially started, if I like went away for a week for a work conference, or if I wasn't there with you at work, or I missed something, I remember feeling like I wanted to be there for every step of the way, because I think, one, because we've done a lot together, we spend a lot of time together, and to imagine you embarking on a journey kind of without me was scary, because I didn't want to be left behind in some capacity, in some weird world that I was living in. And so then I was like, felt really like neurotic kind of about like, tell me how you feeling today, or what's happening, or do you notice anything, or tell me about your day, you know. And I had to be at peace a little bit with the fact that I couldn't physically transition with you.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of attachment to your transition came out of a fear of missing something and then being shocked in some capacity that then you would become some person who you weren't before, which we all know is irrational and is not at all the case. But that was one of my fears. And so now I feel like it's been a year now. Mm-hmm. The transition is slow, and it allows both of us to transition in our own ways, or not transition, but experience a process, a parallel process. And I think it's been healthy in many ways to just respect the fact that you have a different experience in the world than I do. We're different people who are like accompanying each other through life. And that's how I felt the most recently, is like I get to, and top surgery was like an incredible moment to like be able, God, what an honor to be able to accompany somebody through an experience like this. I felt it was amazing to be there for the moment when you first saw your chest for the first time, and to like be the person there when you woke up from surgery. Like, it felt like an amazing moment to be a part of. So, yeah.
Yeah. He said that's exactly how my girlfriend feels. It helps it. It's a process and not something that's all of a sudden.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I remember asking you a lot, and other people asked you this too, like, so if you look in the mirror, like, I wanted to know what the end game was. Like, did you feel like burly, like fuzzy man, like caveman? Is that where we're headed? Like, I needed to know the end.
And a lot of people ask me, like, what's your end game? I'm like, I don't know what that's like. This is not like a Monopoly game.
Right.
Like, there's no end, I feel like, for me. Like, it's like the top surgery thing happened. That was like, for me, it was, and apparently what I said after I woke up from my stupor, it was like the thing. It was like the thing that I had gotten to, that now I could be, like, I started testosterone. I had only been on for like 6 months. And the thing for me was top surgery, and that was what kind of like felt like it set a new precedent a little bit for me. Like, from then on out.
Which isn't the case with everybody.
No, it's just my experience, and I was very attached to the idea of like not having to think about it anymore.
Yeah, and by the time that we got to top surgery, we did a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking, Watching videos was great. Going on that website where you get to see everybody's chest surgery results.
Oh yeah, TransBucket.
TransBucket was super helpful. It kind of just sensitized me from the image of the scarring, the scars, because a lot of the posts up there are like 2 days after surgery, you know, and so I think it was really important. Nipples. The pepperoni nipples. I really recommend that partners are looking at these images so you can kind of get desensitized. Yeah.
Because they're big scars. Like, you know, I think some people, you know, they don't really think so much about that, but like, it's a really big deal to have scars of that length. You know, they're 10 to 12 inches on either side. Like, that's a really big deal. Mm-hmm. Because if you imagine like something like that on your abdomen or something, or like you had an injury and you have this really big scar somewhere else, like you'd be like, holy crap, like that's a huge scar. But we don't think about it so much because we're so just enamored with the idea of not having to have a chest anymore. So
right. Yeah, it was really helpful. And then to see you and your experience just being confident and excited and more at peace with your body.
Yeah.
It's like priceless, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I rarely wear shirts now.
Yeah. It's just, I think that the biggest lesson for me has been going along in the process with you.
Yeah.
As opposed to jumping to whatever conclusion or end result or end game I'm anticipating being. Almost like I'm preparing myself for something, but actually it is just what's happening in the present moment. And we continue to be really communicative. So in terms of your other like physical transitions, like communicative about like things that you notice changing about your body, and we continue to have really open conversations about like how sex was changing, and what was exciting for you and what my experience with that stuff was like. And at first kind of, can I talk about this? Well, maybe we'll have another good podcast about sex or whatever, the live thing. But our podcast. I feel like it's an important thing that people need to talk about. And I remember when we saw a YouTube video of a couple who was talking about, or the partner was talking about like how language was changing between partners during sex, and that maybe language that they used before wasn't really turning their partner on anymore, and trying new language, and a continued kind of flexibility around what works, and naming things that don't necessarily work anymore. I think it's really important to stay communicative about that sort of stuff, even if it's, you know, not as comfortable a conversation that you want to have.
Right.
But
right.
Or like, was that okay? Like, did you like that? I'm like, yeah, it was different. This is how, blah, blah, blah. But it was, you know, I think it's just important to continue the dialogue.
Right.
Yeah, and there was a time too that was kind of disorienting for me, because I felt like I had to learn your body again. And we had been together for 7 years, and I was like, wait! Like, I'm easy, like, you know. Yeah, but and that's a little destabilizing for the partner, because, you know, we find comfort in the familiarity and the understanding, and it could feel a little insecure at times.
But also I think that since starting testosterone, since getting top surgery, it's just been better, because I didn't have any confidence before, and either I would be like wearing a binder or a shirt or something like that, which is like not sexy or cute. And it's just, I don't know, it's just made things different. It's made, not bad, like good.
No, sex is fantastic. But I think also testosterone is like fueling your sex drive in new ways. And I remember feeling a shift in that sex drive, like a different kind of level of like hunger. That was really interesting for me. And you were obviously more comfortable. It's real. Obviously more comfortable in your body, so that changes things. And continuing to keep communication open was important. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. True story.
What else? Are there any other questions?
What were you talking about?
Testosterone.
What did you talk about? Yeah.
I think there was a point in time when I was really exhausted by being the person to out you to the world. Of course, I would never out you without permission. There would be a time when I was like not knowing when I should tell people you were transitioning, which basically was just me correcting people's pronouns.
Right.
Because then like, okay, and then I had this little script of like, oh, Britt uses they, them, their pronouns now. They're non-binary pronouns. So I know it's a little, you know, grammatically tricky because it's a plural, but that's what they like, and that's what I'll be using. If you want, you could also use, it's like blah, 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 you know, and then that became really exhausting, and I felt like it wasn't really, conversations weren't really about me, even when they were initially about me, because they became about you, and being this like ambassador in some ways to the world. And now all I have to do is I'll just use he, him pronouns in certain instances, and then it alleviates any process of not feeling like I'm outing you, because I don't want you to feel unsafe. But I remember when you weren't yet like passing, or in some instances passing over others, mainly when like the dog walker came to the front door or something. Who do you talk to? How do you vent or deal with icky feelings that might arise during Britt's transition without putting it on him? That's a really good question.
Yeah, we actually talked about that a lot.
Should we say,
in the beginning.
Can other people see that?
No, but you just read it.
No, I'll read it again. Who do you talk to? How do you vent or deal with icky feelings that might arise during Britt's transition without putting it on him? So that was a big thing, because as you can tell,
about that a lot.
I'm very verbal.
Yeah.
And for me to process things, I have to talk about them. That's not everybody's, obviously, but putting things into words, the process of putting things into words helps me uncover my experiences and my feelings about things. And there were a few instances in which I had some questions or doubts or concerns or fears that I hadn't yet put words around, and I decided Britt could tell I maybe was a little nervous about something, and we would talk about it, and I would say something that I actually didn't end up meaning in the end, but I said it.
But she was processing it with me.
Bad idea.
No,
not recommended.
That's not a good idea. It didn't, like, I think that the conversation ended up being, we can't do that.
Right.
Like, because you need to find a way to, like, mull those things over with someone else, and then when it comes out, it has to come out in like a different way, because this guy was stirring your bone. So like, because I was going through my own transition, like we couldn't be there for each other, because it's too much. Like, it's just too much to expect me to be able to be there for her, and I can't be the one listening to these things because it's about me. And
right.
She couldn't be like that, like full-time emotional support for me, because that's exhausting. I needed a lot. I needed more support. And there were things that like I also didn't necessarily want to just like say at the drop of a hat out loud, because it's not really always what you mean. Like,
right. And even with top surgery, it took you a while to like be able to tell me that, because you had to really be sure.
Yeah, but that's different. I feel like that's different context. I just mean
like the little things along the way.
What Kai's asking is basically like, how did you process all of this without doing it?
I got a therapist.
Yeah. You got a therapist and went solo.
I went once. This is embarrassing, but I do a lot of talking to myself in the car, because I have a significant drive to work and back. And I would literally talk to myself. It's brainstorming, but I would talk to myself about my own experience, and oftentimes just arrive at something that felt a little bit more comfortable. Then sometimes I had to say my fear aloud for me to realize that it was not a fear at all. And I did do a lot of that. I do have close friends, but those friends are not within the queer and trans. Oh no. Well, I have friends who are in the queer community, but not within the trans community, which, as we know, is very different. And I didn't, I felt like there was a lot of curiosity, and I didn't want my, whatever questions I had to be interpreted as like, oh God, the relationship is doomed. You know, it was just like a question I had, or a concern I had. And so I did a lot of talking to myself and worked through some things on my own. I do recommend, if you're a therapist person, that both partners have their own therapist to talk to, so that you can work through things independently of one another.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then talk.
Yes.
Yeah, because I feel like we were able to, well, in the beginning we didn't realize this, and we were trying to like process it together, and that's just not, it never went anywhere. It was never like successful.
Well. And I remember saying things that I was like, no, I didn't mean that, I just needed to say it, and then it became this like dramatic time, and we don't really do drama very often, and it felt very uncomfortable. So
I feel like it really took like, between, you know, the time when I started testosterone until now, like if we look at that timeline, I feel like it really took some like months in there where I wasn't passing yet, so I wasn't comfortable yet. He's okay.
No, he's not.
Okay, you want to hold up. So I wasn't comfortable with myself enough yet, and I was still doing all of that fun but not fun at all, like YouTube, and like finding the community somewhere, and finding my people, because I didn't have any other trans friends here, and that was really challenging for me. So I was reaching out to like any social media to feel a sense of like, nope, you're like totally fine and normal, like everything you're feeling is normal. I had no one to talk to about the changes. Like I looked up changes and knew what was going to happen, but like, you know what's going to happen. You don't really know what's going to happen.
Because everybody is different.
Because everyone's different. Like, I still don't have, I have like this rare, I'm not going to call it facial hair. I have like fuzz patches. And they're not even real patches. They're just like little hairs that stick out. And
after a year.
You know, after a year, where some people like would already have a lot of facial hair. So it's like, everyone's so different that like, but I needed to go through all of that, and didn't necessarily, because I would talk about trans stuff, like, I could talk about it every day.
It was all the time.
It was all the time.
Every day, every morning, it was videos and videos and videos and videos.
Yes. Every day, every moment I had, and it was exhausting for me. It was so exhausting for her, because we weren't connecting anymore.
And all we were talking about was being trans.
Yes.
All we were talking about was trans stuff.
Yes.
And I remember...
And we weren't even talking about her and her experience, because, like, I didn't know how to do that. And I didn't have the emotional capacity at that point to be like, let me, tell me how this is for you, babe. I can do that now.
Yeah. No, I remember you saying at a point, I think it may have been after a visit with your therapist, that you were like, I really feel like I can't be a good partner right now, or something.
I was not being a good partner. I know absolutely I was not.
But even just you being able to acknowledge that, and then I could say like, okay, so I am having a different experience than I may have had a year and a half ago, with us and our relationship, was validating for me. Yeah. But yeah, it certainly, everything revolved around you and your transition. And then I remember there was a point when we had finally made that appointment for top surgery. And it was like, thank God, your whole demeanor changed. There was like a month where you were on a high of like, change is happening. And then the rest of the
Even though it was like 8 months away.
Yeah. And then the rest of the wait was a little bit more difficult. But I could already feel a weight was lifted off of you. And at that point, we were saving a lot of money. We did not have much. I didn't shop. I didn't buy anything for myself for that entire time.
You like to bring that up.
Well, I wasn't giving back to myself. There was no money for me to go to Marshall's and buy a new shirt. I feel like it's a symbol of like the energy going to Brit, you know.
The energy went to me, and it went to top surgery, and we saved a lot.
We did, but it was. I felt the moral of the story is I felt like I made a very conscious choice about that.
Yeah.
Because I knew it was temporary. I felt really good about the fact that we were saving that much money and we were doing it for you. I was like, I felt really good about it.
Yeah.
Pat on the back. Because I just felt like this is what partners do for each other.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And then I got birthday money and I spent it all on myself, going shopping in New York City, and now I have a few clothes that I can wear that are not from Goodwill. And things have shifted, our priorities have shifted to saving for other things that that are more inclusive of the both of us.
Yeah.
But I do feel like, there was a conscious choice around that.
Yeah.
That felt different from, oh, I'm an ambassador for you, for everybody. All we do is watch trans videos. That was really zapping.
So exhausting. And I remember wishing in that moment that I could stop. That I could like think about something else.
Like me.
Or think about you. Like I could not think about anything else. I did not clean the house. And that's a really big deal for me because I am a little anal about that. Although our house does not look clean right now.
Not right now. Oh my god, I'm sorry.
To look at our cat's ass. Yeah, I just remember that being really exhausting time. I would say, I don't know the exact time where like I felt like that was stopping.
I felt like it was after top surgery.
After top surgery.
Where we just made the decision and we were moving forward. And I felt a little bit that way too when you finally, the process to get testosterone was really difficult. We don't have to get into that now.
No, we don't.
But it was very difficult. But then the first shot, I could tell. And it was a question. You were starting testosterone as an experiment, kind of. Like, once you started, you could stop if it didn't feel right.
And that was my experience. My experience, the way I kind of went about testosterone was like, I'm going to start and I'm going to see how it goes and see if it's for me. And then if it's not, then I'm going to stop. That was that was my plan. And then I felt like as soon as I got that first shot, like, it's obviously like I didn't change the first shot, but like it's a placebo and effect sort of where you just kind of like, you're just like, oh my god, like I started and I'm doing the thing and now like I feel like my changes have been slowish. I don't know. I don't really know. They've been slow, but I also started on a lower dose on purpose. That was my choice. I requested that. So now that I'm like, I finally got to a higher dose, which actually was after top surgery as well. And I think since then, yes, we're married. Hey, Jay. What was I saying? Since top surgery.
No, you were talking about
that's
starting
when I
testosterone.
had that's when I increased my dose, and that's what the dose I'm at now. And I feel like since then, so it was like 7 months, and now I feel like I've had more changes, and since top surgery, I'm a different part of social media in a way that's sometimes frustrating too.
Oh my god, it's still frustrating for me.
But it's not like this like researching myself and researching all these things. It's actually like now I feel like I've gotten so much information and so much like community out of being a part of social media because I don't, especially now at the time, now I have more queer folks here that I've found in the cracks of Rochester, but like, you know, before I had no one. I didn't know any other trans person or let alone like a queer person in general. So it was really hard for me. So I got a lot out of that information and I just felt like, well, now I'm at this point where I feel like I can share all of that and share my experience and
that's why we're doing this.
And that's why we're doing this.
But I wanted to also mention, there was someone that your therapist found who was a partner of a trans person who lived in Buffalo.
Yes.
And your therapist was like, I think that Tammy and this person should hang out.
Yes.
We got sushi once.
Yeah.
In relation to Kai's previous question about who do you talk to, about stuff that comes up.
That's a really long question. Answer for Kai.
Sorry, Kai, but I doubt he's still around. But that was useful. What was fun about that was it was great to have an opportunity to speak with another partner of a trans person.
Oh, he's still there.
Hey, And then it also was like, oh, this person, yeah, sure, we're a partner of a trans person. We can like practice using pronouns together. I can hear this person using pronouns in the same way I am, and that's exciting. But then also like, she's a person, and we only had so much in common, and we had a great time. We would totally hang out again, but we haven't really hung out since then. And it was like, oh well.
And they're like far. It's just like it's nice to have community
nearby,
like, right here where you're like, I don't know. I don't need
community
a lot.
Meaning
I don't
like
require.
We have like 3 friends.
You do not have to admit that.
I don't know. It was just a nice reminder. It's like, okay, yes, it's important to share your experiences with people who understand them. So you can speak to people who don't judge you or don't have some like weird projection as to what that might mean for the future of your relationship because they've never experienced this before, or a voyeuristic weird like
that's true,
which we experienced at the doctor's office.
That was really fucking weird.
Very weird.
Healthcare here sucks.
But my point is, we're all just people too. So it's like just because you find someone who's wearing the same color shirt as you doesn't mean you're going to be besties.
True story.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I also wanted to mention that what you were getting at initially is that when you started testosterone, I could feel that you were already emerging into a more confident.
Yeah. I think I also
person.
just had like this weight lifted because it
That's
was.
what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Weight lifted.
Yeah.
So it took me like 4 months to find a provider that was an hour and a half away that would prescribe me testosterone. So to finally like start was like it was just such a weight lifted off my shoulders. I felt like it was like I could move on a little bit more, and then the top surgery thing for me was like the thing, like
and then I could move on a little bit more.
Yes.
Since I also want to bring us back to my life experience. That's why we're doing this, because there was a good couple years there where a lot of the dialogue was at how can we have Brit feel better in their body, what pronouns, what name we tried. The name was difficult for me to make adjustments to. But now we're back at Brit, which is closer to a familiar name.
Yeah, which
we still don't know, but I feel like I
still
would,
don't know. I'm not set on it.
Yeah, and I am more used to being flexible with words now than I was at the time we were experimenting with names.
Right. And
some people are better at it than I am. But I do feel like once there's something in taking action that was such an important part of the process, and maybe you guys have felt that too in your own process. Like the mulling over it's like the anticipation of a thing that you never know is going to happen and when is so excruciating that the ability to just take action and do something, even if it didn't have any clear results yet, was really a huge weight lifted off of our relationship. And then I could focus a little bit more on like my work responsibilities and what goals I had.
Yeah.
And then we were kind of resumed, and I think most recently we resumed a relationship that we can talk about like what other things we're excited about in our futures. And then of course it was a good reminder though, a couple weeks ago Britt decided with their primary care to increase their dose a little bit, and they had a really off week. They were kind of depressed a little bit, I felt.
Oh yeah.
Even though you're on nights, so it's hard to interpret that.
I was working nights, which is also just makes me like a disaster. Yep.
Right, but I felt a little reminder of, I could feel your energy shift, and I sensed that reminder of what it was like before they started T, where it was like just
like my hormones were just like
right. Yeah, I wasn't right, and I remember it was a good reminder because we've been talking about like other big life stuff that this transition is still happening. Yeah. I mean, it's not like it will never not be happening, and it's your identity, but it's an undercurrent, and I think I took for granted a bit that things had stabilized a little bit.
Right.
Like emotionally for you, and that's still something that we'll continue to work on simultaneously. Yeah. Work through or whatever kind of changes emerge.
Yep.
So that was a good reminder for me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific questions? Because we've been doing this for a while.
What about your sexuality, babe?
Oh, my sexuality?
What's your sexuality, babe?
Don't ask me that question. So I will try and make this brief because I feel like we've been talking for a long time. What's the hardest part of your life? what would or doesn't make it easier for whichever one that I take? What's Straussium?
I don't know what that is.
What's Straussium? What's the hardest part for your? What was the hardest part for me?
What makes it easier for you?
I would say, in relation to Britt's just recent question, the hardest part for me was less about, and I think this is oftentimes what it comes down to for partners. It's less about Britt, what changes are happening for Britt. The changes are so minute. It's not like things just wham, like happen. It's more so the questions I was forced to ask myself that were certain things that I had just chosen not to address, like my sexuality as being one of them. And not like I've come up with these incredible answers about what my sexuality is, but I had just been at peace with not really addressing the fact I've had several like serious relationships with men. I've had a few serious relationships with women, and I met Britt and attracted to their masculinity off the bat, but like kind of assumed this role of being in a lesbian relationship, even though I never identified with the word lesbian. And queer just felt also really othered, so I didn't like using that word, even though I use it more now. And so when Britt when I realized that Britt would eventually might like pass as male, I had to be like, well, what does that mean for me and my sexuality? Mm-hmm. And
also, I feel like people were asking you.
People were asking me that, which is not an appropriate question for people to ask, by the way. And I remember doing some long talking to myself out on walks with our dog or whatever, where I was kind of grappling with this idea that with this like, okay, I'm lesbian, like the language that feels so confining around sexuality, and also kind of identifying too that I was still am still very much attracted to Britt. And I feel like I may have had, before you came out as trans, a little guilt around the fact that I was still noticing myself being attracted to certain aspects of like masculinity, even though you weren't inhabiting those qualities yet. Mm-hmm. And then being like, you know what, it just is. Like, I know I'm still attracted to Britt, that's all that matters. We only have 1 minute and 48 seconds remaining.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I had to ask myself some big questions about that. And I think that was the hardest part, was more so what things I had to address within myself. And ultimately what it's come down to is that I just am who I am. And I decided that it's unimportant that I fit into any category, and I know that I'm attracted to this person here, and all of the different facets of feminineness and male masculinities and all of the different definitions of those words and how Britt inhabits those things happen to work really well, and that the things that I was initially really attracted to you and for the beginning of our relationship have actually just kind of exaggerated and have been good for us. But I think that was the hardest part of all of this, is continuing to have to excavate my own experience and look at myself in the mirror closer than I may have wanted to initially. Yeah. Was that a good answer?
It sounded good.
Okay. So our time is coming to a close. Hey, Jay. Thanks for tuning in.
We can do this again.
Let us know if you wanted. If I'm just curious, maybe we focus on one thing more next time. I don't know.
We can do that.
I like talking about this stuff. So if you have any particular questions for me or,
Good.
Let me know.
Bye.